Another thick stack of papers, and this show could get a little controversial. What do I mean by that? Well, I did preview it earlier that I would be revealing my top 10 games of the college football season for 2026. They're not according to ESPN, they're not according to any other outlet. These are my personal games ranked in order, top 10, not week by week. We're going top 10, and I will reveal those tonight on the show. Also, it seems like this Brendan Sorsby saga takes a new twist and turn every single week. I do have some more on that. And actually, I was talking to a source close to Cincinnati today who filled me in a little bit more on what's going on. I'll get to that. EA Sports, what are we doing? What are we doing with the new college football video game? I have some thoughts on that. Also, Yahoo Sports is introducing a college football, fantasy football. Really excited about that. And I'm going to wrap the show with a college football uniform reveal, very close to home here in Nashville, Tennessee. And I'm going to wrap up with something fun as well, because after all, as I check the clock here, July 9th, 6:02 p.m., it's still the summer. We can have a little bit of fun. We have fun during college football season, of course, but it's still the summer, and we are allowed to have a little fun, especially when we're kicking back and talking college football. Welcome into the air raid with Parker Kelley here on YouTube, and you also might be watching on Twitter. If you are watching live, I really appreciate you. If you're not and you happen to be watching later, I also appreciate it, just as long as you watch. And most importantly, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. There are two channels that I'm going to ask you to subscribe to. The first being my personal YouTube channel at Parker_Kelley10, and also give 1025 The Game a subscribe on YouTube. Also, the comment section is open. Feel free to drop a comment. We have plenty of room on the show today. It is jam-packed, but if you leave a comment, I will make sure to get to that as well. Like, heart, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We hit a mini marker because, as I mentioned on the last show, we are starting this thing from scratch. We're starting this show on YouTube, on Twitter from scratch. We hit 50 subscribers after creating the channel at the end of last week, on the road to 100, and we can't do that without any of you, of course. You are the reason that we are able to do a show. So I really appreciate that. Okay, we have really important matters to get to. This is where I'm leading off the show. My top 10 games of the 2026 college football season. And I'm going to go in order of 10 to 1 because I want to save a little anticipation because there are some really fun games. Again, really thick stack of paper here. So lots of stuff to get to. Okay. Number 10. I don't know how many of you know that this game is being played, but it is. It's not a traditional game, but it is happening this year, and I'm excited about that. Number 10 on my list of top 10 games for the 2026 season. Notre Dame at BYU. This will happen week 7. To get specific on that, Saturday, October 17th. Notre Dame and BYU, Provo, Utah. I really like these types of matchups, ones that we don't typically see, but we're seeing two power teams go head-to-head, both of which will be represented in the preseason top 25 when that is released. I'd be willing to go out and say maybe even top 15. Notre Dame will certainly be there. BYU, maybe. They do return a lot of last year's teams, so I expect them to definitely be inside the top 20, top 15 potentially. So Notre Dame at BYU in week 7. Here's an interesting note on that game. At least for this season, Notre Dame and BYU are playing in replacement of what is usually an annual rivalry in USC and Notre Dame. Now, since Notre Dame and USC started the rivalry, I don't know, what was it, maybe like in the 1930s? The rivalry had only been stopped twice. One because of a World War II, and the second being COVID, because games were limited to regionality during the COVID pandemic. And for some reason, they can't get the scheduling figured out, and they replace USC on their schedule with BYU. So Notre Dame at BYU. Again, that is week 7. I'm really looking forward to that. That comes in at number 10. Okay. Number 9, I went back and forth on this one because there were a lot of SEC versus SEC games that I could have put here. And while this does include an SEC team, it is a return series, right? This game was played last year in Norman, Oklahoma. This will be played in Ann Arbor this year. That is Oklahoma and Michigan. I'm really excited about this game for a couple of reasons. One, we're seeing a new head coach from Michigan in Kyle Whittingham, who came over from Utah. He has a quarterback by the name of Bryce Underwood, who is a former 5-star quarterback out of high school. It's no secret that Michigan paid a lot of money to get him, right? Didn't necessarily live up to the media's expectation from last season, but he still is a 5-star recruit. Kyle Whittingham brought over his offensive coordinator from Utah and Jason Beck. Jason Beck was able to work wonders with Devin Dampier, who was the quarterback last year at Utah. Let's see what he can do with Bryce Underwood. And we get to see John Mateer in his second season with Oklahoma. Now, if you remember this time last year, right, or whenever this game was played, so it would have been week 2 of last year, John Mateer, this was kind of his breakout game. And after this point, a lot of people, myself included, I actually thought John Mateer was going to win the Heisman Trophy at the beginning of last season. And he looked like the Heisman frontrunner after this game, certainly, but then he broke his thumb and things were never really the same. Now that he's fully healthy, he's changed his throwing motion a little bit. I'm really excited to see what John Mateer looks like in year 2 with Oklahoma, Brent Venables. It's going to be a lot of fun. So that is my number 9 game. Number 8, we're going SEC on SEC here. This is one of the best rivalries in the sport. And it's a shame that it wasn't played for a while when Texas was in the Big 12 and then Texas A&M moved to the SEC. They didn't play this game, but now we're getting into we're going back to the way things were. Both of these teams are in the SEC now. They play at the end of every season, right? Thanksgiving rivalry weekend. This is my number 8 game. This will be a 6:30 p.m. Central Time kickoff on ABC. The atmosphere is going to be off the hinges. College Station, I believe it's a top 10 biggest stadium in the entire world. So Texas will be going into that venue. Texas is one of the preseason favorites to be a national championship contender, especially considering the amount of money that they spent on this year's team. Arch Manning entering his second full year as the starter, what they were able to do in the transfer portal. There are going to be sky-high expectations for Texas this year, but also, too, how is Mike Elko and the boys down in College Station able to respond after going to the college football playoff last year, actually hosting a first-round game against Miami? Now, they didn't win, but we got a little taste of what Mike Elko and co can do at Texas A&M. So there are going to be high expectations for Texas A&M. The expectations are going to be a little bit higher on Texas's side for this season, at least to start out. That is going to be an incredible atmosphere. It has been the last couple of years they played. Now, since joining the SEC, Texas A&M has yet to beat Texas. This is an opportunity for them to do so. Will they do it? Not sure, but we'll find out. Number 7, Michigan at Ohio State. The game. Now, it typically doesn't matter if Michigan has a down year or not. Now, they didn't necessarily have a down year last year. They weren't as good as their they weren't as good. They have high expectations. They were 9-4. That's what they finished the season. Listen, expectations at Michigan, regardless of the year, are always going to be high just because Michigan, the all-time winningest program in college football, right? They're a blue blood. So expectations are always going to be high. I had to put this game in here because, in my opinion, this is the best rivalry in college football. And it always has been, at least for me. The hatred between these two teams, second to none. Now, there are comparisons, right? Like the Iron Bowl. Georgia Tech, Georgia. There are all kinds of great rivalries. Rivalries are the bedrock of college football. If you know anything about me, I want to preserve rivalries as much as we can. That's why I was so upset that USC and Notre Dame are not playing this year, and that game has been replaced with BYU. I'd like to see Notre Dame play BYU and USC every year if that's possible. It is, but I don't know if it'll actually happen. So we'll have to see. Going on to number 6, this has been one of the premier rivalries in recent memory in college football. Georgia at Alabama. You remember this game 2 years ago where Alabama had a really sizable lead in Tuscaloosa. Jalen Milroe was at quarterback. Carson Beck was at quarterback for Georgia. And Alabama went up 4 touchdowns. Georgia climbed their way back, eventually got the lead at one point in the game. And then Alabama won. Ryan Williams, that was his not welcome to college, but that's how he really stepped onto the scene with that last touchdown for Bama to give them the win. Week 6, Saturday, October 10th, there was a span from 2008 to 2015 when these two teams only played twice in that span of time. Now it seems like they're playing every year. This is just a phenomenal matchup, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now we get into the top 5, and these were pretty easy for me, but it was just a matter of ordering them right from 5 to 1. I'm going to go Oregon at Ohio State. This is week 10, Saturday, November 7th. This has become almost a new rivalry in college football, especially within the Big Ten, since Oregon is now a member of the Big Ten Conference, despite them being on almost opposite ends of the United States of America. I digress. I'll save that for another time. They played 2 years ago in Eugene. That was one of the best games in college football that year in the 24 season. And then if you remember, they played in the Rose Bowl in the quarterfinal round of the college football playoff, and Ohio State splattered Oregon. So that was the last time that these two teams met. They're going to be playing again in Columbus, in the Horseshoe. I believe this game, it was either 21 or 22 when these two teams played in Columbus. It was a really good game. Oregon actually ended up winning that game. It was C.J. Stroud's freshman year, I believe. So we're going to get that again. 2 preseason national championship contenders. What else could you want? Moving on to number 4 on the list. And Ohio State is going to be in here quite a bit. But this one is pretty obvious why it's in here, right? At number 4, Ohio State and Indiana. Rematch of the Big Ten championship from last year. This game, I cannot describe. I don't have the words to describe how crazy this environment is going to be. This is going to be the biggest game in the history of Indiana football, at least from a home perspective, right? This game is being played in Bloomington, Indiana. Expectations around the football program at Indiana have never been higher, and you're welcoming in Ohio State. Again, this is a rematch of the Big Ten championship. These are 2 teams, once again, who are going to be high in the odds in the preseason in terms of winning the national championship. This is the biggest game in the history of Indiana football at home. This is going to be awesome. So I have that at number 4. Moving on to number 3, the third consecutive time that Ohio State is mentioned. And this one goes without saying as well. Ohio State at Texas. This is week 2. This game will be 6:30 on ABC. College Game Day, I believe, already announced that they would be there. This game was played last year in Columbus. I love that these two teams are doing a home and home. It was a 14-7 win last year for Ohio State. We got to see Julian Sayin for the first time. He didn't look great, but they got the win, right? And I mean, that's really all you can ask for against a really good Texas team when you consider that a quarterback is making his college debut, making his first college start. Getting the win's a really big deal. But now we get to see Arch Manning in year 2. And we get to see all of that money that Texas spent when games weren't being played, because I don't like to refer to the word offseason. I believe it's a bad word. So now we get to see all of that come into effect. Ohio State at Texas. Austin's going to be rocking. College game day will be there. There's a reason why I have it this high. Now we get into the next two, and I'm really excited to talk about these. Number 2, Miami at Notre Dame. I really could just leave this little graphic up on the screen, and you would understand why, considering what happened last year. Miami beats Notre Dame week 1 of the college football season last year in Coral Gables. And then Miami loses 2 games. They lose to Louisville, they lose to SMU. Notre Dame, they drop their first 2 games of the season, right? They lose to Miami, they lose to Texas A&M. They're 0-2, but Notre Dame does not lose a game after that. Miami struggles a little bit about midway through the season. Notre Dame jumps Miami in the college football playoff poll. And then at the very last second, the last college football playoff ranking, we see Miami jumps Notre Dame and Notre Dame gets left out of the playoff. This is a revenge game. This is a revenge game. Marcus Freeman has already talked about this on the record, by the way, of how, as a head coach, as a college football head coach, obviously the most important game is the next game. And every date, every time you get to play, you get to strap up on a fall Saturday, it is important. This game is going to have a little extra meaning. And there's a reason, considering what happened last year. So I have Miami at Notre Dame. This will be played late, and I mean late in the year. Week 10, Saturday, November 7th, 6:30 p.m. kickoff. Can you imagine South Bend at night, at home, late in November, the conditions? Miami has never seen anything like that. It is going to be fascinating to see how they perform in those types of conditions. And I think, I've said this before, I think Miami, there's a chance that they could have a little bit of a better team than what they had last year. So I'm really excited to see that. And number one, LSU at Ole Miss. I really don't need to say anything, do I? I really don't need to say anything. Lane Kiffin leaves Ole Miss, goes to LSU. Ole Miss people, rightfully so, are bitter about the way that all ended. Lane Kiffin not very good at breakups. Week 3, Saturday, September 19th, 6:30 p.m. Central Time, ABC. I can't remember the last time that College Game Day announced before the season even started. Week 1, they're going to be at LSU for Clemson LSU. Week 2, they'll be in Austin for Texas Ohio State. Week 3, they'll be at LSU Ole Miss. I can't remember the last time College Game Day announced their first 3 venues before the season even started. But when you have games like this, weeks 1, 2, and 3, you understand why they did it. So LSU at Ole Miss is my number 1 game. There's not going to be enough National Guard in the country to be able to prevent the types of things that might be thrown at Lane Kiffin, the types of things that he'll be called. He'll be called things he's never heard in his life. It is going to be toxic. It is going to be awesome. Even if you are at the game, if you're not at the game and you're watching from your couch, regardless of how you consume this game, it is going to be fantastic. Now, there was this question floating around on Twitter. Will this venue be worse for Lane Kiffin than it was when he went to Knoxville and returned to Tennessee back in 2021? My answer is yes. I think that this will be worse. This will be a worse environment for Lane Kiffin than it was in Knoxville in 2021. Now, he got golf balls thrown at him. He got mustard bottles thrown at him. He got all types of things thrown at him. But if you remember when Lane Kiffin left Tennessee, there was at least a period of double-digit years where Tennessee fans kind of had the opportunity to heal the wounds, heal the scars, right? For Ole Miss, this is fresh on their minds. So this is going to be worse. And I understand that where Ole Miss plays their game in Oxford, their stadium is about half the size of Neyland. I get all of that. I just think the atmosphere is going to be incredibly toxic. Not that it wasn't toxic back in 2021, but I think this has an opportunity to be even more toxic than that game between Ole Miss and Tennessee back in 2021 in Knoxville. We went about 20 minutes right there. I'm telling you, I get fired up about this stuff. I get really fired up about this. So those are my top 10 games. if you happen to have missed the live stream, you happen to have missed the podcast, um, I will put these out on Twitter so that you can see. But these are my top 10 games of the 2026 college football season. I'd like to give a shout out, by the way, to Jake Lyman. He is, I do the show with Jake from 9 a.m. to noon on 102.5 The Game. He actually gave me a little inspiration for this exercise because he did the same thing. The only difference between him and I is I did not include Vanderbilt and Georgia in my top 10. He knows what I mean by that. So, really appreciate all of you that are listening live. We still have a lot of show left to go. So, let's continue here. So there's more news regarding Brendan Sorsby, and it seems like every week this saga takes a new twist and turn. Right. So here's what was put out by Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, and I'm going to reference his work a lot because he really does a great job with all of this. So the NCAA has sent a letter of, and I'm really going to try to say this word right. I struggle with the pronunciation of inquiry, so bear with me on that. But they sent a letter of inquiry to the University of Cincinnati regarding Brendan Sorsby, his time at the university, and if he placed any bets on the football team, or it really doesn't matter if you place bets on the football team, on the men's basketball team, on the women's volleyball team. If you're betting on sports at Cincinnati and you're a student there, that's against the rules. That's the rules. So they send a letter of inquiry to the NCAA, and I did have a conversation today with Mo Egger. He covers Cincinnati for I believe it's the Cincinnati Enquirer, and he does a show up there in the greater Cincinnati area. I believe they're ESPN affiliate. So I had a conversation with him earlier today, kind of going over this, kind of fill me in on where things stand right now. And basically, what he told me was the NCAA sending a letter of inquiry to the University of Cincinnati and making straight up allegations are two completely different things, right? Basically, the NCAA wants to know everything that we want to know, right? With did he place bets on the Cincinnati football team? Did he place bets on any of the other Cincinnati sports? He did place bets on the football team when he was at Indiana in 22, placed over 40 bets. I'm not going to assume that he did the same thing at Cincinnati. I'm not going to speculate either. I'm just going to wait for the reporting to come out. But the NCAA just wants to know everything that we want to know, right? So, and Big 12 media days were this week, right? We talked about that on the last show on Tuesday. There were some executives, some higher ups in the Big 12 that met with some of the Texas Tech brass, right? Joey McGuire, Cody Campbell, boosters, assistants, Kirby Hocutt was there. And they were trying to bury this Brendan Sorsby hatchet right before the season starts because it was just a whole mess and it went on for months and months and months. But the saga really isn't over. And this just goes to show that, right? So back to my conversation with Mo Egger, I was asking him, I'm like, hey, did Cincinnati, were they aware that anything was going on? And if so, did they take any precautionary measures to, prevent this from getting to the level that it's at right now? And what he told me was there is this app that Sorsby had on his phone, and I guess some of the other athletes had it as well. And I can't remember the name of the app off the top of my head, but basically it alerts whoever at Cincinnati that, hey, Brendan Sorsby is going to Prize Picks, he's going to FanDuel, he's going to whatever betting service that he used. So that alert went off, and they did take some precautionary measures, but they really didn't think it was anything outside of that. And then the facts and the reporting came out that Brendan Sorsby paid thousands of dollars to other people to make bets for him. So he kind of went around, right, a loophole around the system. So from a 50,000 foot view, it looks like Cincinnati really didn't know how bad it was. And who knows if Scott Satterfield, their head coach, knew anything about it. We're going to have to wait for that to come out. So it takes new twists and turns every single week. That's where we're at. with the Brendan Sorsby stuff. I did think Cody Campbell had an interesting comment as well, because I mentioned at the beginning of this segment that, Big 12 officials, Texas Tech's head coach Joey McGuire, their athletic director Kirby Hocutt, Cody Campbell, they all met trying to bury the hatchet. Cody Campbell had an interesting comment to Yahoo Sports, and I'm going to summarize it for you. He talked about Texas Tech is really opening the eyes of everybody in the conference. A rising tide lifts all boats. That's exactly what he said. And Scott Frost, who is the head coach at UCF, actually seconded this. And I talked about it on the last show, because when you have Texas Tech spending as much money as they are, and the Big 12 is not necessarily known, and granted, this is a very new era, but the Big 12 is not exactly known for spending as much money as, let's say, conferences like the Big 10 and the SEC. They're behind the ACC in terms of revenue generated. So, what Texas Tech has done has really sped things up for the rest of the conference. So, I hope that, as somebody who loves college football and not just one conference in particular, I really hope that one day the gap is able to close, right, between the SEC, Big 10, ACC, and Big 12, where it's not two conferences pulling away from the pack. All right. I thought there was a very interesting list ESPN put out earlier. They ranked the top 10 head coaches heading into the 2026 season, and I'm going to read this to you because I thought it was a pretty good list. And again, if you haven't seen it, it was put out on ESPN earlier today. So ESPN ranked their top 10 college football coaches for the 2026 season. Number 1 should be no surprise. That's Curt Cignetti, and there's really no arguing with that. Indiana, before he got there, was the second all-time losingest program in the history of college football, and Curt Cignetti turned them into a national championship winner in 2 years, and they went undefeated in the process. So there's really no debating that Curt Cignetti is number 1. Number 2 is Kirby Smart, and I also thought that was pretty fair. He was the number 1 head coach last year, won 2 straight national championships with Georgia, the model of consistency since he's been there, right? The amount of SEC titles, which is 4, 5 college football playoff appearances. That one just makes sense. And number 3 is Ryan Day. And honestly, Ryan Day and Kirby Smart are kind of, you can flip-flop them, and I would have no issue whatsoever one way or the other. Ryan Day is in current college football, is the winningest active head coach. And he won the national championship in 24. The amount of Big 10 championships, all that stuff, that kind of speaks for itself. Moving on in the list, this is where I really start to think, okay, this is a really good list. Marcus Freeman is at number 4, the Notre Dame head coach. He's 43-12 as the head coach at Notre Dame, which is a 78% winning percentage. Marcus Freeman, and I'm actually going to talk about him a little bit later, is one of the models of consistency as well, right? He's fantastic at establishing a culture, right? People want to play for him. He's a extremely talented recruiter. He's likable. I don't know many people, unless you're, a USC fan or you're a rival school of Notre Dame. I don't know many people that don't like Marcus Freeman. He's a very likable guy, and he wins. He made a national championship appearance in 24. Some college football playoff berths in there, absolutely. A lot of winning done. Number 5 is Dan Lanning. I am a huge fan of Dan Lanning. He is one of those guys, he's one of those head coaches where I've heard a lot of people personally in circles that I'm in say, well, what has he won? What has Dan Lanning won? And what they're referring to is this thing called ring culture, meaning Dan Lanning has not climbed to the top rung of the ladder yet and won a national championship, but he still won a lot of football games. In fact, he won the Big 10 in his first year as a member school of the Big Ten, and he made the college football playoff the last 2 years. He's 48-8 all time at Oregon, almost an 86% winning percentage. And he's done an incredible job. They're recruiting at a very high level. And I made this reference earlier when I was on the radio of when you watched Oregon in, 2014 or prior, when they had Chip Kelley, when they had guys like Mark Helfrich, even when they had Mario Cristobal, they were known for their speed. And that was the thing that really separated Oregon from everything else. But if you watch Oregon this year and, within the last 2, 3, 4 years, they're almost built like an SEC Big Ten team out west. And them being in the Big Ten and them being able to dominate and them being able to go toe to toe with teams like Ohio State, teams like Penn State, and go on the road to places like Iowa and win low scoring, gritty football games in bad weather conditions. Oregon teams in the past wouldn't have been able to do that. But Dan Lanning has been able to build that in Eugene. And he's a young guy. He has a coaching tree. Here's Dan Lanning's coaching tree. I don't even think he's to age 40 yet. Kenny Dillingham, who's the head coach at Arizona State, was his offensive coordinator, his first offensive coordinator at Oregon. Tosh Lupoy, defensive coordinator, just took the head coaching job at Cal. His offensive coordinator from last year, Will Stein, is now the head coach at Kentucky. So Dan Lanning, before age 40, already has a coaching tree. Not much else needs to be said. Getting on down the list, let's go to number 6. And number 6 is Steve Sarkisian. Now, Steve Sarkisian is another one of those guys where, due to comments that he made this spring about, Texas Tech, the basket weaving comment he made regarding Ole Miss, the fact that he hasn't won a national championship yet. There are some critics out there of Steve Sarkisian, and there is going to be a lot of pressure on him to be able to not just contend for a national championship, but to win one with the roster that he's established. Now, I'm not sure that I would have had Steve Sarkisian this high. I definitely would have had him in my top 10 coaches. He's 94-55 at Texas. So, really good coach. I think Steve Sarkisian is a brilliant offensive mind. Definitely would have had him top 10, but there are a couple names down this list that I would have put ahead of Steve Sarkisian. Number 7 is Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, to me, is, again, another one of those offensive gurus, right? Been able to get monster numbers out of quarterbacks, whether it's, Matt Corral or Jackson Dart or Trinidad Chambliss, right? But Lane Kiffin, to me, has always been a second-tier kind of head coach. Now, he's going to have more resources at LSU. He's already really embraced the state of Louisiana, which is something, believe it or not, that you have to do if you are the head coach at LSU. That's why Brian Kelley didn't work out there. Lane Kiffin, to me, though, has always been a second-tier head coach. So he comes in at number 7. When we get down this list, Mike Elko. Mike Elko is at number 8. I think that's fair that he's in the top 10, seeing what he's been able to do at Texas A&M the last 2 seasons. I have a lot of faith that Mike Elko is going to be able to climb this list as well because recruiting has not dropped off any. So that's something to keep an eye out for. Number 9 is Kyle Whittingham at Utah. Very underrated coach, Kyle Whittingham. He's been around for a while. 177-88 during his time at Utah. And first year at Michigan. Now I'm excited to see how this goes because Kyle Whittingham is a little bit older. He's on the back end of his career. He gets a former 5-star quarterback to work with. He's going to get a lot more resources at Michigan than he would have gotten at Utah. So I'm excited to see what happens with this. Now, here's where we list. We have a tie for 10th, according to this list by ESPN. I would have had these coaches a little bit higher. That's Mario Cristobal from Miami at number 10. Now, Mario Cristobal coming off a national championship appearance. Mario Cristobal, who has done this since he got to Coral Gables, right? They started out with, I believe it was 4 or 5 wins. Then they went to 7 wins. They went to 10 wins the year after that. And then they got to 13 wins. So he just keeps improving. His win total keeps improving every year. They got to the national championship game last year, were at midfield and had a chance to drive it down the length of the field to win a national championship. And yet, I still think he's going to have a better team this year than what he had last. So I would have had Mario Cristobal a little bit higher, personally. And then he's tied for 10th with Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. Now, Kalen DeBoer, he's had back-to-back 4-loss seasons at Alabama. Alabama fans are a little spoiled because they've had Nick Saban. They've had the string of national championships, right? With Bear Bryant, with Nick Saban. And now, since Kalen DeBoer hasn't instantly done that, he's going to get a lot of criticism, but I also don't think the criticism of Kalen DeBoer is as loud as some people think that it is. Kalen DeBoer made a national championship game at Washington in the 4-team era, beat Steve Sarkisian on the way to doing it, and then making the national championship game when he was at Washington. They played Michigan. So I would have had Kalen DeBoer a little bit higher. I would have had Mario Cristobal a little bit higher. Those are really my only criticism. I think they got most of it right on this. Now, let me read some of the names that were just on the outside looking in, guys that received votes. Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Dabo Swinney was able to do something that many people didn't think was possible, and that is go head-to-head, go toe-to-toe with Nick Saban, and he actually beat him twice in the national championship game, but college football's changed a lot since then. Dabo Swinney hasn't been quick to make those adjustments, so the last few years have not been up to Clemson's standard. They did make the playoff a couple years ago, the first year of the 12 team, lost to Texas. We're actually a lot closer to winning that game than people might realize. So he received votes. Matt Campbell at Iowa State, I think that's fair. Rhett Lashley from SMU is on this list. Eric Morris at Oklahoma State. I actually talked about him on the last show. He's one of my, you better watch out for him. You better watch out for Eric Morris at Oklahoma State because I think he can make some noise. And again, if you missed what I had to say on him, go back to the last show. I highly recommend you check that out because I went in depth on the Big 12, and I talked about Eric Morris. He's worked with guys like Patrick Mahomes. He coached Cam Ward at Incarnate Word. Drew Mestamaker, he's going to be a star this year in college football, quarterback at Oklahoma State there. So Eric Morris did receive some votes. Kalani Sitake at BYU, Kenny Dillingham, Arizona State, Willie Fritz of Houston, talked about him on the last show, and Clark Lee at Vanderbilt. When you get 10 wins in the regular season at Vanderbilt, you deserve to be on this list. So Clark Lee is definitely represented on there. So this question was asked on the show today at 102.5 on Next Man Up. Jake Lyman and I, we debated this. If you were to pick one coach, not just from that list, but one coach in college football, or you could pick a professional coach, an NFL coach. I chose to stay in the college ranks. But if you were to pick one coach to coach your team for the next 10 seasons, who would you choose? Now, the easy answer would be Curt Cignetti, and I would not slight you if that was your answer. The problem is Curt Cignetti is 65 years old. He's under contract to Indiana through 2033, signed the 8-year extension. So if you're thinking in terms of longevity, that's why my answer wasn't Curt Cignetti. There's no doubt that he's the best coach in college football. I want to make that clear on the front end. Curt Cignetti is the best coach in college football. But if I were to pick one coach to lead my team for the next 10 seasons, my mind immediately went to Marcus Freeman. That's where my mind went. Marcus Freeman is my answer. Marcus Freeman is a phenomenal recruiter at Notre Dame. He's established a rock-solid culture in South Bend. He's likable. His players want to play for him. And in this era of college football, relationships have always been important, but now more than ever, relationships matter a lot. And Marcus Freeman is one of the best at establishing those relationships. And on top of that, They get really good football players and they win football games. They made the national championship in 2024. I have a feeling they will be back. Now, I'm going to release my preseason college football top 25 in August. Not going to do that this month because July is not quite yet prediction season. Notre Dame is going to be in the top 5. Let's just say that. So I would pick Marcus Freeman. That is where my mind goes. All right. Now to something less fun. I have some friends that play this college football video game. I grew up on this college football video game. I bought it when it first came back in 2025. I did not get the latest edition of the game, which came out in 2026. And I believe the 2027 game, you could get it on pre-order, I believe, earlier this week, but it officially came out to the rest of the public today. I've been made aware of an issue, and it has something to do with corporate greed, which is unfortunately not a new term. That has been pretty relevant in college football given the last few years. But there is this feature, and I guess where you have to pay physical money to be able to upgrade your coach in the game. And you can't use your points that you get in the game to upgrade your coach. You actually have to shell out more money because you didn't shell out enough to buy the video game in the first place, apparently. You have to pay money to upgrade your coach. Now, I'm going to be honest. I don't play video games a whole lot. I do play some. I did not get the latest version of the college football video game when it came out in 26. I absolutely bought it when it came back to us in 25 because, again, I grew up on that game. A lot of people my age grew up on that game, so it was a really big deal when it came back. I haven't really gotten the latest versions of Madden because eventually it just became so repetitive. It became the same game. But I do feel for the fans because on this show, we really value the fans' input because fans, I'm one of you, we make the sport go round because without us watching every single Saturday in the fall, without our invested interest in the sport, college football would not be as profitable. So I understand. And because I am one of you, I am a fan. I just happen to have a mic in front of me and I'm talking about this stuff. So, but I feel for you guys. One of my good friends at 1025, Connor Newt, has been complaining about this on the air, and I understand. Like it is ridiculous that you have to spend more money. Now there are some people that willingly choose to spend their money to, buy different features in the game, but it's always been available where you could upgrade your coach with the points that you got while playing the game, and now you have to spend money to do so, which is just crazy ridiculous. Again, apparently you didn't spend enough to get the game in the first place. So we're seeing a lot of greed in the sport, and I don't always like talking about it, but we have to. It's a reality. And it is July. There are no games being played right now. This is the type of content that we are getting. There's this hashtag CFB play don't pay that's been going around. And I believe college football, the video game, posted on Twitter, and there were more comments with that hashtag than there were likes of the post. So that kind of shows you where the fan base is. They're pretty fed up with all this, and I understand. Now, on a positive note, I did see that Yahoo Sports put this out on Twitter, and I'm actually really excited about this. There's going to be, for the first time ever, college football fantasy football. You have it in the NFL, and now you're going to have it at the college level. That is available on Yahoo Sports, I've been told. So, will I play this? Probably, because I am a college football sicko. I will say this. I also do partake in NFL fantasy football, and it is a lot to keep up with, especially considering the amount of leagues that you may be in. Like, for example, I think being in 2 leagues is the perfect amount. But yet somehow last year I got roped into doing 4 different leagues. And it just got to the point where it was so much to keep up with. Like in one of the leagues that I take really seriously with some buddies from college, I had a spot in the championship game, and I forgot to check my lineup right before one of the games. Just because I was involved in 4 different leagues, it's a lot to keep up with. Um, and I was beating myself up for weeks because I'm very competitive when it comes to that stuff. So, will I play college football, fantasy football? Probably. I want to see. I want to see how this is. And I may have to quit some of my other leagues. So we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. Because it is a lot to keep up with, but at the same time, it's pretty fun. It is pretty fun. So we're gonna wrap up the show with a couple of notes. May not go as long as we did last week. That's okay. So I'm going to try to pull up some pictures because we've had some uniform reveals in college football over the last few months. The most recently being a team that's really close to us here in Nashville, the University of Tennessee. And I'm going to pull up the pictures here for you if it works. Perfect. Here we go. So Tennessee has signed a new deal with Adidas. Now, for those of you that may be wondering why Tennessee made the switch, I believe this was announced last summer, if I remember correctly. Basically, Adidas was willing to make Tennessee their flagship team. And when a brand wants you that bad, they're willing to make you the flagship out of every other school in the country that is sponsored by Adidas. You take the deal, right? You go where you're wanted. And in this day and age of NIL and teams trying to do everything they can to scrape every last penny so that they can go out and buy players, it makes sense, especially if Adidas is willing to chip in as well. So, as you look here at a couple of the pictures, and I'm going to pull up they released the white uniforms as well. They released their black uniforms. Those were the ones that were released today. If you notice, Adidas didn't really change anything on the uniforms. And I'm here to tell you that is a great thing because Tennessee is one of those teams. They may not be your Alabamas, your Michigans, your Ohio States in terms of like the tier 1 blue bloods in the sport, but Tennessee was a blue blood back in, before I was born. Like in 98, they won the national championship, right? There are people who are older than I am that remember how good Tennessee was back in the day. So they have a very traditional style of uniforms, and I'm going to pull up the white ones as well. I believe they were released earlier in the week. Tennessee has a very traditional style of uniform. So I really applaud Adidas for not changing anything because when you have tradition, you don't mess with that. So I really applaud Adidas for what they did. I really like the uniforms. I'm really happy that they didn't change much, right? So I really, really like the uniforms as I figure out how I'm going to get these pictures off the screen here. Here is another look at the black uniforms as well and the orange. So I applaud Adidas because there is actually another team in college football that is sponsored by Adidas, and they just got new uniforms, and that is Nebraska, right? And Adidas changed Nebraska's uniforms. And Nebraska, one of those teams like Tennessee, where they're one of the historical blue bloods in the sport. Again, they were a dominant powerhouse. People will tell you back in the day. And another historic uniform, not much pizzazz with their uniforms, but honestly, not much is needed when you're in Nebraska and you're one of those historical teams and you're in Lincoln, and there are no professional sports in Lincoln, Nebraska, but everybody follows Nebraska in Lincoln. It's awesome. It is a college town. It's awesome. Adidas changed their uniforms, and I didn't like it. As somebody who's very much a traditionalist when it comes to college football, we don't need to change perfection. We don't need to mess with perfection. I honestly feel that way, and I don't compare college football to college basketball a lot. They're two separate sports. They're two great sports, but they're two separate sports. But we just saw in March Madness, right? This thing was expanded to 76 teams, and the outrage of the general public was pretty much the same, right? The sentiment was felt. Nobody liked it. In fact, I don't think the coaches really liked it that much. And that's saying something because you expand this thing to 76, that allows more access for teams, but yet somehow the coaches, who it seems like they would be in favor of more access, were also against it. Don't mess with something that's already pretty much perfect. Why take that risk? I don't know. But we are seeing some of that in college athletics. And I'm just happy to see that Adidas didn't really mess with Tennessee's uniforms all that much. So I applaud Adidas. I thought they did a great job with it. I'm going to wrap up the show. I told you I was going to wrap up with something fun. So on the show that I do with Jake Lyman on Next Man Up on 102.5, 9 a.m. to noon, highly recommend you listen Monday through Friday, live every weekday. Me and Jake Lyman. We had Corey Curtis on the show, who is the News 2 sports director, and he comes in every Wednesday. We have a lot of fun with Corey. So we made this bet because Corey Curtis is of the belief that Dabo Swinney is going to get fired at Clemson this year. Jake and I, of course, we both laughed at it. Like, no way that's going to happen. So we don't believe that Dabo Swinney is going to get fired. Before I continue with the rest of the story, I just want to remind you that also this time last year, we viewed Penn State as a national championship contender. We viewed LSU as a national championship contender. And then you go and you look back, and yet James Franklin and Brian Kelley were both fired before Halloween. If you would have told somebody that in the preseason that was going to happen, you would have gotten put in an insane asylum. So I'm not going to really rule out anything in college football because it can get pretty crazy, in case you haven't been able to tell. But Corey is of the belief that Dabo Swinney is going to get fired at Clemson, I guess, by the end of the regular season. Jake and I, we do not think that is going to happen. So there is a deal on the table, and I wanted to let you, the audience, know this as well, so that you could hold Corey accountable for when he has to face his punishment. So if Dabo Swinney does not get fired at Clemson before the end of the season, Corey has to treat Jake and I to a breakfast at Waffle House. Now, if Dabo Swinney does get fired, Jake and I have to get Corey coffee when he comes into the show on Wednesday for 4 straight shows. So that's our deal. That's our deal. Now, let me know in the comments. Let me know after the fact if you happen to be listening to the show later, if you think Dabo Swinney is going to get fired at Clemson this year, or if you think he'll stay. I am of the belief that he's not getting fired. He's not going anywhere. I think Corey's crazy. But I also say that in a jokingly way because I love Corey. But that is our bet. And also with that, that is the show. So we went a little shorter than we did on Tuesday. That's okay. We covered a lot of content. I had a lot of fun ranking my top 10 college football games of 2026. I will put that out later on the socials, so make sure you're following me at Parker_Kelley10 for that in case you missed the show. But I highly recommend that you watch, and I also highly recommend that you subscribe to the channel. Again, we just eclipsed over 50 subscribers. That doesn't sound like a lot. In reality, it's not. But we did just start the channel from scratch at the beginning of last week. So, or at the tail end of last week, rather. So that's a mini marker, and we're on the road to 100. And we know that this show has the potential to grow bigger and grow better. And that would be because of you, the people that are watching, the people that are liking, the people that are subscribing, the people that are interacting, right? So I really appreciate it. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel at Parker_Kelley10. If you think you are, please just go ahead and double check. It doesn't sign you up for anything, right? It does not sign you up for anything. I want to make that clear. It just really helps out the show, and we will have the opportunity to do different things with this show to make it better for you to consume as a listener. Also, subscribe to the Game Nashville YouTube page as well, because we do the show with 102.5. So make sure that you are subscribed there. We will be back on Tuesday of next week. ACC Media Days are next on the docket. So we will have an ACC preview for you then. In the meantime, enjoy the weekend. Take care. God bless. We'll talk again soon.